While coronavirus is front and center for President-elect Biden, there is another cause he says his administration will tackle. Mr. Biden is pledging to tackle climate change and make it a signature part of his presidency. The U.S. is currently the second largest contributor of greenhouse gases in the world, trailing only China in that category. Mr. Biden has promised to re-enter the U.S. into the Paris Climate Agreement. You'll recall President Trump formally withdrew from that agreement last month. For more, let's bring in Kathy Baughman McLeod. She is the Senior Vice President and Director of the Adrienne Arsht-Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council. Kathy, welcome. Great to have you with us. So President-elect Biden's proposed climate and energy plan is arguably the most ambitious we've ever seen from an incoming president. With that said, the Senate could still very well remain in Republican control, which threatens to curtail his vision. So how do you believe Mr. Biden should navigate this as president?
I think President-elect Biden's #1 opportunity is economic. He framed climate change as a jobs issue and a jobs opportunity. And the idea that the most conservative states have some of the biggest growth in wind and particularly wind energy, but also solar energy. And so it's a job strategy, and it's also a way to cross the aisle. And I think when we see President Trump leave Washington and some of the mood that is here in D.C. now, we will see President-elect Biden getting back to what he knows how to do really well, and that's make a deal. And I think the economics of a clean energy transition are in his favor, regardless of the Senate's status.
And Kathy, to your point about clean energy, the president-elect is proposing to make U.S. electricity production carbon-free by 2035 and to have the country achieve net zero emissions by the middle of the century. First off, I want to know if you believe this is feasible, and how does the country go about doing this in a cost-efficient manner?
It's a huge investment opportunity. We can create that clean energy supply chain and all sorts of policies that support it and that are good for conservative states and for more Democratic-leaning states. And I think when we see the work that's been done around that job growth and the understanding of how what the potential is with proper policy support and rolling back some of the tax incentives or other incentives for fossil fuels, the transition that President Biden-elect talked about is real and necessary, and of course is coordinated to our rejoining of the Paris Accord, and that's an important step also.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of the Paris Accord, the president-elect, as you know, has vowed to rejoin it. It's an agreement that President Trump has frequently lambasted for being bad for the U.S. economy. As we know, though, Mr. Biden has appointed John Kerry, who helped negotiate it, to oversee U.S. re-entry into that agreement. But the former Secretary of State is saying, hey, the accord alone doesn't do enough. I wonder if you think that even at this point, the Paris Accord might be outdated. You know, it was addressing issues, 8 years ago. Do we need something even more stringent now?
Well, we know that the Paris Accord, those goals that countries set, and most countries were not meeting those goals, the U.S. included. But also, if we did meet those goals, we would still see temperature rise. And so we're facing the 5-year anniversary of Paris and that famous agreement. And I think the need for climate adaptation, our ability to protect ourselves from the storms and floods and fires that are being fueled by climate change, is growing in its importance. Almost as or more important than, not more important, but more important that we face the fact of what climate change is doing to bring us suffering and economic loss from all of those storms and fires and floods. And so it may be time for us to look beyond the metrics of Paris, but the importance of Paris is that it is a global issue and we need to be at the table. And the opportunity for Paris is that we reassert global leadership around climate change and also use the skills that John Kerry has as a negotiator and as a diplomat, which are very strong. So it's a great first start.
I want to pivot now to China for a moment. The U.S. and China's relationship has soured under President Trump's administration, but both governments share a common interest and a responsibility in combating climate change. Do you believe that the environment could be a catalyst for the Biden administration to perhaps reset relations with Beijing? We certainly need Beijing to come, into some kind of climate accord with good intentions. So how do you foresee the two superpowers working together on climate change in the coming years?
Well, China recently set their own net zero goal, net zero by 2065. And so it creates immense opportunity for the negotiation, for the trade, for increasing the rate of bringing down the cost of renewables worldwide and making that clean energy supply chain more affordable. And so, again, I go back to Biden as a deal maker and Kerry as a diplomat. And these are great roles to play in getting that relationship back on solid footing. And this is a perfect place for that to kick off. So I think it is full of opportunity.
And what has Facebook's response been to all this?
Facebook is thinking about this and looking at the opportunity just like everybody else. And I think understanding the delicacies of the relationship between Facebook and the political situation and positioning inside the U.S. and against the friction of our relationship with China right now, I think they're navigating it very carefully.
All right. Well, Kathy Baughman McLeod, thank you so much for your analysis. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.